tell you a character.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give everybody another minute or two before we get started. All right. Good morning and afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are. And thank you for joining us today. I'm Alyssa Fox, VP of Marketing at New Harbor Security, and we're excited to have you here for today's discussion on whole of state security. I'm pleased to welcome our speakers, Denise Riley Hughes, Secretary and State CIO of Vermont, and Justin Finlid, New Harbor Security CEO. In her role, Denise has guided Vermont's enterprise digital modernization efforts, focusing on building secure, efficient, and user-centered systems that improve how residents interact with state government. Justin works to advance state-of-the-art integrated cybersecurity services and has more than 20 years of cyber experience, much of it in multinational corporations prior to founding New Harbor. Together, they bring extensive experience in modernizing infrastructure and protecting state and local agencies while maintaining public trust. Let's look at a brief agenda for our discussion today. So here's what we're going to cover around whole of state security. Why does whole of state security matter? We're going to define what whole of state security is, talk about the current state of whole of state security, practical steps for implementing this, and then what is the CIO, CISO role or technology leader role in this evolution? So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Denise and Justin.
Cool. Thank you, Alyssa. First off, I just want to say I'm super excited for this. Not only to talk about whole of state, because something that's been near and dear to me, but it's also been to you, and you're one of my favorite people just to hang out with and have a conversation with. So having an excuse to be together and do this is pretty exciting. So I've been looking forward to it for a while.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. So today we're, as Alyssa said, we're going to talk about whole state, why it matters. More importantly, we want to put a definition around it. Want to kind of talk about the current state of things, some practical steps, stuff that you all can take away, and then the state executive role in implementing this. So anybody who's been in around state and local government for a long time, has seen a big evolution towards the concept that we've been calling whole of state, right? And I think over the years it's evolved quite a bit from to me, the legacy definition of whole of state meaning is security within the entirety of a singular state government as an entity, which is central IT and all the supporting agencies, and whether and in trying to ensure that you have services or shared services across either the executive branch and, to the extent that you can, judicial and legislative. And historically speaking, I think that's been kind of the definition of it. But as we've seen the evolution of technology, awareness, the idea of the realization that cybersecurity is a shared responsibility, and that everybody's better by sharing information, that we've seen a little bit more of an uptick or appetite, if you will, with local governments wanting to participate with the state. Utilities, public utilities all want to share information for cyber. And every other public institution within that geographic region is now seemingly a little bit more open to this concept. And the thing that I've seen as a definition, I'm curious what your thoughts on it are, is that what's interesting is about all of these entities within a geographic region all have a shared common customer, which is the population of that region. And so if there's a cybersecurity event that maybe impacts a hospital, sharing that information with emergency services can allow them to route life-saving services quicker and more directly than what they could otherwise, not having that information. And so I was kind of curious, like, we've talked a lot about this. You guys have made a lot of great strides on it. And I was curious, like, what have been your perspectives on how you've seen this evolve over the years?
I have a lot of them. And thank you, by the way. Thank you for inviting Vermont to the table with you in this. And thanks for Alyssa for the introduction. You hit it on the head when you talked about the interconnectedness. And that's exactly how we see it. The issue is, one, I've only been in state government holding this hat for 3 years, but I've been seeing and supporting state government, engaged with state government for, I mean, almost 20 years, over 20 years, and seeing that evolution of where we came, and we're talking about digital when we talk about cybersecurity, to where we are now. The modernization and evolution has really created this interconnectedness between all of us. And so when we can agree that the ultimate receiver of support, service, and value is the Vermonter in our case, then we can start peeling back the onion to look at where we are all connected. So when I look at state systems, we've gone through a major modernization effort, and it's not been in silos. It's been in intentional connectedness. And there's not one organization, municipality, business, or person that is not somehow connected into a state system in some way. So that hospital that you were talking about, I mean, we can go down the route of critical infrastructure, or we can just look at it from an connectedness from cybersecurity standpoint. If there is a breach, if there is a security incident at that hospital, they're connected into likely 5 to 10 systems that we operate within the state of Vermont. So that let's say you user account compromise, or the data breach, or the ransomware attack, that could potentially touch into our systems because we've enabled either API authentication, data transfer, data sharing, information, whatever that may be. And so their problem becomes my problem. And the only way to really tackle that is, and I'm going to steal this term from Region 1 FBI liaison that we worked with, was cybersecurity is a team sport. And if we look at cybersecurity as only being within the walls of this office, this agency, or this, state, government branch being the executive branch, then we're really limiting the support and service that we provide to Vermonters.
Yeah. Are you, on your side, are you seeing more the towns, municipalities, or even public utilities starting to like reach out to you guys to say, hey, we have interest in collaborating in one way or the other?
There's a little bit of a push and pull. There's the push is us reaching proactively out to them because, quite frankly, municipalities have so much going on in their day-to-day. Sometimes cybersecurity is the last thing that they think about. So we're proactively reaching out to them, and we're in an effort right now to focus on some targeted outreach. And then we do have some that are coming back to us. So interestingly enough, I have a couple dozen municipalities that we support as part of our end user community within our core services. And that's not typical in state government, but if I can ensure that we're built to a capacity to support that, we're able to engage and work closer with municipalities in a way that they can't do independently.
Yeah, interesting. So there's a little bit of an evolution there too.
There is, and I think that it's continuing to evolve.
Yeah, and that actually might be a pretty good segue into their next section here, is like starting to put some definition around like what this is. So we talked about municipalities, and it's really starting to kind of set the kind of 4 parts to definition here, which is having an ecosystem, which we kind of talked about. It's the ecosystem of the regional ecosystem of you have your state government, right? But it's also, you have your local municipalities, you have your healthcare institutions, you have other institutions that serve a common public constituent, right? So that's kind of our ecosystem here. everybody's trying to serve the same person with their own services and their own mission. But some of those things that you talked about here, in order to make them work, to work with a municipality or a utility or whatever it may be, you have to have trust. And that's kind of the next step of getting this to work.
Yeah.
And I know you guys have done a lot of work there, especially
We
work
can talk
that,
about it.
yeah, the work that Sean,
Yeah.
Sean's done. And I know he's been kind of front in all this. And I was kind of curious if you could talk about that too.
I would love to talk about that. And you've been at the table with us through that process too.
Yeah.
So Sean Naylor. He is a special projects director within this agency.
Yeah.
Happens to also be the former CIO. So that's a blessing in itself, is that not many state CIOs can invite the former CIO back to come work for them.
Yeah. But it also says a lot that they're willing to come back and work.
Yeah,
for the
he
new
was
CIO.
also the one who hired me. So, I mean, it does say something about that relationship
Yeah.
and trust.
Yeah.
So I think we're the only state that's done this, but we created a cyber advisory council under law. We had a number of legislators. I think of Laura Sibilia is a representative in Vermont's House who really helped spearhead the creation of the Cyber Advisory Council.
Mhm.
And what it was focused on is critical infrastructure. So you're
Mhm.
hitting on a couple of things, although we talk about small business, but government and all of the other 16 the other 15 critical infrastructure areas are representative of this council. And it's taken a couple of years to get to that point of trust so that everybody really understands that we're a community for each other.
Mhm.
Ultimately for Vermonters. This isn't about regulating cybersecurity. This isn't about forcing policy down in a place that is evolving too fast for policy, quite frankly. And we've started looking at applying the response within whole of state and what does that look like. And so there's communities of practice that are now built up within the Cyber Advisory Council. And Sean Naylor has done quite a bit of work in that space, but interestingly enough, he doesn't do it alone.
Yeah.
The only way that we can do that is with the partnership. So Vermont Intelligence Center is that other lens of public safety, and they fall under the Department of Public Safety that's been at the table with us. And
Yeah.
right now they are proactively going out to municipalities who have some pretty significant critical infrastructure areas. The National Guard is a big part of that cohort and that community as well. We've seen a lot of support and interest both from the utility space, but also healthcare.
Mhm.
And those are the organizations that really know and understand that we don't all operate independently and we all depend on each other so heavily. And so it's been successful so
Yeah.
far. But I think what it's done is also allowed us to have a visibility of readiness. And so you didn't really say that, but what you're talking about is
Yeah.
readiness. And the trust is a big part of being able to be honest about getting there. And so readiness doesn't mean that you can't do these things. It means that you got to hit a certain level of readiness to claim preparedness.
Yeah.
But also you have to hit that to be able to get to that next level. And we've spent a lot of time on education and awareness, but we've got to move on to that next level, which is starting to intake that intel and action it and have some proactive efforts and work around what's happening across the different sectors, the different industries, the different critical infrastructure areas to see if that can better inform the community in that area, but then also inform that whole of state.
Yeah. And I think this time, because you touched on something that we're going to talk about here in a little bit too. I think what I've heard you say is through coordination and trying to achieve some level of resilience. Something, I mean, aspirationally, like we always want those things to be formal, but oftentimes they rarely are, right? And so there's a version of this that's good enough to like get started, right? And what I've seen in the work that Sean Naylor has done here and how he's run point and coordinated all these different groups, not only has he established trust, he's now created a level of coordination, but in the course of doing just those two things, he's also introduced a level of resilience. Even even in an ad hoc way, just performing those first two steps, because now, I mean, in Vermont, we have floods all the time, right? And if we draw the same analogy, the same weather analogy to cyber, of saying, if we have 7 towns across Vermont who get impacted by a flood or get impacted by a cybersecurity event, the state's going to want to know about it to figure out if they can apply resources to it to support. And so, but now Sean has all those contacts. Like, he can pick up the phone and call me like, oh yeah, we know Sean, right? Even though we don't have run books and playbooks developed, like, that's still enough to get started in a resilient type of response. And I want to make sure like that doesn't go overlooked, because it's like, it's critically
building
important.
the community
Totally.
is the one of the very first critical steps. And you know, you've got your 4 key areas. Like, you can't have resilience and coordination without that, and that community is the trust. It's a lot of work, and it's not for the faint of heart by any means. But interestingly enough, you had said there's no exact prescriptive model. Well, there can't be, because now you look at the introduction of artificial intelligence and the risk that has put in our comfort of cyber posture, really, because it's ever evolving. And if we ended up limiting ourselves to a very prescriptive structure, we would lose every time. So we've got to take a little bit of an agile, adaptive approach to the work that we do.
I think it's the theme of the story. For sure. Okay, so this actually might be a good time to talk about the kind of current state of things here. So we can move on to the next part here. So we have just kind of carrying that thought through here is the path can be a curvy one, right? And we can be clear on what the North Star is, but the path can be very different for a lot of folks here. So I think a couple of things that you've talked about was simply just getting started is the most important part. And there's a saying like the journey to 1,000 miles starts with the first step, or some version of that, right? Which I feel like we're, at least in Vermont, it definitely feels like we're well on our way. And the first step's always the hardest. And at least the folks I know in security tend to be more of the analytical type, right?
You think?
And
just a little bit.
Just a little bit. And so because of that, like, I see almost a tendency to be they overanalyze it a lot, and just saying, okay, like, if we do this, like, what's the next steps? Like, what happens if we find success? Then what do we do? I was like, don't worry about it. Like, that's like tomorrow's problem. Like, just start doing it. Just start talking to people, and it will start to happen. But I think taking that first step and having that shared vision, or like that, what that North Star is really important, because like, imagine in Sean's case, right? Sean Naylor's case is he's got to kind of talk about what that vision looks like and get people to buy in. And like in his case, at least the way I would see it is kind of like, it's less about him, and it's less about the state, and it's also, if he's talking to a municipality or whoever, it's kind of less about them too. It's more about who we're positioned to serve, which is the citizens of the state. Which, you know, like, this also, like, I feel that too. It's like, okay, like, we live here, we operate here, like, what else can New Harbor be doing to help? So, like, I guess, like, everybody has to be bought in for, like, the right reasons. And, like, it's got to be one of those things, like, I think you have to self-select it. Like, no one can push you to do it. Like, you have to want to do it for everybody's benefit. And I feel like in order to get this to work, and you guys certainly have the ingredients of that, it's people are self-selecting in the absence of people pushing them, right? Which is a pretty powerful movement.
But you've been there from the beginning. So I'm not going to put this back on you, but I have a couple questions for you about that too. I appreciate you seeing that evolution, because this isn't something that you can just stand up a program and it's done. It has been an evolution, and it was also a lot of self-reflection and self-awareness around what do people expect from their state, but also recognizing that we're in a climate and we're in a space right now where there is a transformation happening,
Mhm.
and government has always been structurally built around the bureaucracy policy around the administrative structure of a program. And we're asking for it to operate a little bit differently here. We're asking for it to operate in this space of delivering service to the constituent. And those services, we may be the regulators of some of those critical infrastructure areas, but the service is still ultimately for the Vermonter. And I think it's helped that we have always considered New Harbor to be an extension of our security team. So that has helped. So early in the process, we engaged you in this very office, sitting in one of these chairs that we're sitting in, and said, this is what we want to do. So you've been on this journey. So maybe that's my question for you is, did you think that we would be here?
100%.
That's the same answer. Okay.
100%. I would say being very transparent. It's the path has zigged and zagged more than I thought it would.
Yeah.
Actually. And I think these are some of the things that you only learn by like talking with people and building relationships, but more importantly, like meeting folks where they're at. And so we typically see cyber as like a very technical issue. It's an interconnected issue, and it's solved by technology. But in the course of like hearing some of Sean Naylor's stories, it's like some of these folks is like one person in like a water treatment facility with like an OT system from 1950, and their realm and scope of cybersecurity is way different. And the risks that like I might see on my day-to-day are just like they're not applicable to them. And they have a different set of priorities and concerns and risks that are relevant and germane to them. And I think that's the piece has been a little bit of an eye opener for me. It's kind of forced me to level up a little bit too, and open the aperture of like, like how we actually do security in a way that is meeting people where they're at, right? And so it changes the type of threat intel we collect. It changes how we communicate it.
Yeah.
Because at some degree, like people don't matter. They'll be like, we don't have a computer.
Yeah.
Like we don't
know what to do with what you give us.
Totally. Yeah. And so I think these are some of this is some of like the variability in the path where it's saying like it's not like linear. It's not planned.
It
And
isn't.
That's been a real eye opener to me. But I would also give like a lot of credit to not only like Sean Naylor and everybody that supports him, but it's everybody who's a recipient of it and who's willing to come to the table, because they're zigging, zagging also, right? To try for a shared outcome. And so I think only when, again, come back to trust, and like once you have that trust, like now we're actually able to prioritize here. So we have our North Star, we're able to prioritize, and like it kind of gives clarity to everybody's mission. And I think that's an important part. So I think even for me, it's been a real learning experience also.
Thanks for being on the journey with us.
Yeah.
I think you also bring up a point too, where we have had a single dedicated person who has been the one to measure the progress. And one of the points, just if I could take a little tangent, is that we were also surprised when we did evaluate the landscape of the community where folks were really at. I think you feel like and then until you see it, we run surveys biannually with this group, and it's to measure progress over time. But when we identified where folks were really at, we made some assumptions. We may not have reached out to the right folks, but as far as the posture, it was an opportunity-rich environment, really, for us to move forward. And so having that person to spearhead and build the relationships and engagement has been critical. We now have another role. So we've typically been an internal service agency operating on behalf of state government for state government, but in this particular lens, we're very community facing. And so we have a Deputy Chief Information Security Officer position that is starting on Monday, who will be working very closely on this program, alongside the current program director. And that has, for us at least, shown the maturity and progress that has been made, but also puts a lot more focus on building that sustainability within the community too. And I like that you talked about your program. One of the things that I've noticed too is that, like you said, that meeting people where they're at, having to adjust, but you've also created an opportunity to scale up when ready. So you're ready for them, and also we're helping them move to that next level. So I think that is great, because when the momentum really starts increasing, that they'll be able to land in a place that's solid.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that we have a deputy here to kind of help operationalize some of these things, right?
Exactly.
I know Sean and the rest of the team are gonna appreciate the extra hands. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
For sure. And then so kind of the last piece of this, and this again for now might be a little bit further down the road, but obviously like as we get better and smarter about all this stuff, is then at that point, to your point, being able to scale, also mature, and just be able to get better overall.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here as we're talking about this too, thinking about a lot of the conversations that we have, where I at one point in my life was a partner to state government. You are in that position now, and this is a really great example of what I talk a lot about, and now I've heard you talk about a lot, is that that partnership, one, it goes both ways. Two, win with us and lose with us. So you're on the journey, and there's a difference between a partner and a vendor. And I don't think that there's a lot of organizations out there taking the steps that you did to say it's the right thing to do. And when it becomes the right thing to do, it's natural, right? And you're on the journey with us, and you've been with us each step along the way. So I think that partnership consideration is really, really critical to our success too.
Yeah. I think we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about that piece. But I actually, since you just brought it up, I want to like talk about it now. And I think one of the advantages that that we have, and I've told my team this, is like if you always self-select the right action and behavior for someone else's beneficial outcome, like good things will naturally happen. And it may not be immediately, but in our case, like if we always take care of the customer or the end user, or in this case, our community, dollars will eventually follow somehow. Like I don't always know.
Can they follow to me?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm kidding.
But if you orientate yourself to that, like it's just an easy way to be, right? And sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, I think that's what the SLGP program is too, right? If we do this right, then this federal program that every state has access to now actually becomes ultimately for the benefit of what it was designed to do. And so that's there is short-term goals, stretch goals, and this should be the motion.
The piece that I would add is across like the vendor community, especially the one that serves state and local government, the folks that I see and work with, they are really personally invested in serving the constituent. But I think sometimes they're kind of handcuffed by like corporate restrictions on like what they can and can't do, which I think sometimes is a little frustrating to them, at least what I see across the community for what they're able to do. And so the decision is sometimes coming from people above them that are a little bit more removed from being able to make this decision. But what I would say on your side, and I've certainly told you this before, and I think it's important that everybody who hears it, is one of the things that I've always really admired about you is that you've been able to mobilize an entire vendor community, some that some who are customers of the state and some who aren't. But even the ones who aren't, I know that if you called them today, they would pick up the phone immediately and say, what can we do to help to jump in? Because you've you have all these people kind of bought into your shared mission because you have that you win with us, you lose with us mentality, right? And we all know that like you've got our back, and we all want to reciprocate and do the same for you. So
Well, we got to see that in the floods.
Yeah.
I know that we're not talking about the floods today,
Yeah.
but when we were at our greatest need in a time when we weren't planning for that,
Yeah.
that we had those same partners step in, including New Harbor, to help us.
Yeah.
And that alone introduces a level of cybersecurity risk that nobody thinks about when you're in a physical disaster. But when you're in a physical disaster, there is global visibility to that impact, and that's when you are at your lowest, right, and at your most vulnerable to those attacks. And sometimes it's just for disruption, but it's disruption enough that we're not in a position to want to handle that at that moment, because our attention is to, supporting those most impacted. And so that's why that partner model is so important.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And just on that, like we actually see that in other states too. The flood is a good construct, but we see it in like fires and other emergency situations. And sometimes that threat isn't within the actual event itself, it's everything that comes after with it. And it's security, it's business fraud, it's everything. And as a state leader, someone working within state or a municipality or whatever it is, like your first job is to get services back online for all the reasons that you have to do it. And like that's kind of like the last thing you want to have to worry about, right? And so to the extent everybody can kind of step up and provide some air cover, I feel like it's the right thing to do for sure.
And we haven't talked enough, and I think it's probably we all know, but we're not talking a lot about it, is that the impact of the flood that was so widely spread, we will have a cyber attack at some point that will have that same level of impact.
Totally.
So when you look at our ability to have containment in, single organizations, single institutions with the openness of the digital age right now, that is going to change dramatically. And so we're going to look at cyber incidents in the same respect. And so when you look at, let's say, a wastewater treatment facility or a water facility that provides water to a town, there is only a threshold of weeks, days, months that they're able to operate without, right? So if they were to unplug all their systems to manually be able to manage, and then who does that impact downstream? It now starts impacting their electric supplier or utility. It starts impacting their wastewater facility that then also has to likely dump the gray water or the clean water back into the rivers and streams, and those same rivers and streams are downstream of hospitals, and they're supplying, water for those hospitals or the schools. And so it all of a sudden becomes this massive community impact that all started from a cyber attack or a cyber incident. And so that will happen. I know that we're all preparing for it and trying to prepare for it, but it's in those tabletop exercises. And that's really, when I say resilience, that's what we're talking about, is that although we don't want everybody all up in our businesses, we want to make sure that when we need them the most, that they're there for us.
Yeah, agree.
Sorry to paint that picture. I
No.
feel like I just took us really.
No, it's good.
Okay, good.
Well, I kind of started earlier on it too, using like the hospitals and like emergency services.
Yeah, but it expands. So the reality is it expands so far beyond that.
Yeah, it totally does. That actually might be a good segue into like some like practical steps that we can start talking with folks on. Actually, we kind of laid out our steps here for practical implementation. Next one would actually be the CIO role. Care.
We should talk about that.
So the CISO and CIO role, I think, has evolved over the years, especially as it pertains with whole of state. And at least what I think what I've seen from my standpoint is typically the CIO or CISO was someone who's tend to be a little bit more technical in nature, and the CISO position or the CIO position was more a mark of like tenure or expertise in a particular technical discipline, right? And I feel like now more so than ever, it's not that at all. And the most successful folks that I've seen have situational awareness. Like they certainly own their business and they own the outcome of it, but they might not be the specific technologist that it was like 15 or 20 years ago. And what I've seen, the ones that move the needle from like a whole estate standpoint are the politician. I use kind of politicians like this, but like air quotes, if you will. But someone who they have political savvy and business savvy and can build relationships and trust with people. And I've seen that as like a market change in order to do some of these initiatives. But it's almost like you need someone with the personality and disposition to like build people up versus always like tearing people down, and trying to be more collaborative in nature versus like hold everything in. And so when I look across like the people like I know in like different regions or ownership of different entities, if you will, I can see like who's working well together and not. I was curious if that's something that you see on your side. Like, is that something that you guys talk about as like a state CIO, like group?
Often,
Yeah.
the agency as a whole, yes, we're evolving ourselves as an agency. We just went through a pretty big organizational change and remodel to actually design the agency specifically for what we're talking about here. Design the agency for the Vermonter. And we are statutorily responsible for providing the technology support and services to state government as a whole. When we look at who each of those entities are supporting, it's the same Vermonter.
Yeah.
And so we have to recognize the need to create those digital services in a way that is repeatable and consistent for the Vermonter and quality. And you can't have disparate degrees of quality in all of that for the Vermonter. So yes, we've taken a very human focused approach to tech, which now means if I spend too much time on the tech, I feel like I'm down in a rabbit hole. I need to be out there on the relationship side, on the trust side. I mean, trust is earned. It's built and earned. And I don't want to change policy for health or for labor or for any of those other things. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm not what's holding them back from changing it, or the technology is not what's holding them back. So we're the enabler. So the whole concept of the modern CIO should be about getting to yes. And it should be about ultimately who we're serving and supporting. And it is definitely an evolution, and it's fun to see, because I am seeing, like you had described, I am seeing that occur across other states too. So we've got a cohort of lessons learned and what works and what doesn't, and it really varies by flavor. So I would say the same is for the CISO as well. We went from monitoring millions of security events every year to we're almost 400 billion security events. And if I had a CISO super focused on those events themselves as technology continues evolving and growing, then they would lose sight of what we're talking about here. They would lose sight about who ultimately we're connected into. And so we need to elevate ourselves a little bit more and truly be the partner that our residents need.
Yeah. Let me ask something. So if there's someone listening to this,
there's people listening?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who is in the position of wanting to pursue this. Maybe they had the energy, they had the appetite to take it on, and they're in a leadership position, but they're met with resistance, perhaps maybe by other leaders, or another leader could be within their entity, or maybe even at an adjacent entity, would be a municipality or like a whatever it is, or whatever you want. What recommendations would you have for them?
to want to move into or
Um,
engage in the community?
How to engage in the community, but more importantly, like how do you, like what recommendation would you give someone to help them persuade others to pick up the mantle to do the right thing? And by the way, I think I've got my own answer to it. So
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, that's a big question.
It is. It's huge.
And my first observation is you're always going to have resistance. And we hit that on a daily basis. When you focus on the why before you focus on the how, you start breaking down those barriers of resistance.
Yeah.
And I'm a big change management person, so I recognize that when you do hit that resistance point, you can't punch through it. You have to actually either address it, relieve it, remove it, get them on board, or you have to move on to the other entity. And we don't want to do that in secret. We don't want to leave anybody behind. But my recommendation would be to basically do what we've been saying here, building the trust, and lean in a little bit more. One of the biggest challenges that we ran into was this perception that we were coming to regulate. And we have proven that time and time again in facts and actions that is not what we're trying to do. We really are trying to be an extension of their support.
Yeah.
How would you answer that?
Surprisingly, very similarly. I think having the why or your North Star is super important, because at the end of the day, that's going to be your tow truck to like pull you through some of this stuff. Because this, like any other big initiative, like you're going to hit walls, and it will put dog ears on you if you're not motivated by the right things. And I think it's critically important to stay focused on the small wins and the small successes. I think people like too easily lose sight of some of those things. And that could be you had a great meeting, you got someone bought in, you developed a new relationship. And those things like might seem pretty small, like on a singular thing, but like they're actually huge.
Yeah.
They're massive stepping stones. And I feel like too often I see people like discount those because they're like, well, I don't see any progress moving. I'm like, you're making huge
It's
strides.
progress, yeah.
Totally. And so I think those are some of the victories. Like we need to make sure people like inventory, but it starts with a strong why. And then this journey, like it's gonna zig, it's gonna zag. It's not gonna be what you think it is at the beginning. But being able to kind of put yourself out there and create a fan or get a toehold or find someone who can partner with you on this. And even if it's one person, now your strength is 100% more than what it was before.
Exactly.
And then you do it again and you do it again and you start building it brick by brick. And I think for some people, it might go a little bit faster. For some folks, it's going to be a long time, but you just got to keep stacking.
They'll come back around. They always do.
Yep. And then there's going to be the folks that who are the detractors. They may never come around, but they're certainly not going to come around until they see a track record and level of success and repeated success before they realize, like, okay, this is actually a real thing. I'm going to give it my time.
I agree. I have found my biggest detractors over time have actually become my biggest champions.
Yeah.
And it was just they needed the proof, that they needed the trust, and I had to give a little bit. I had to meet them where they were at.
Yep.
And sometimes when we come in, we don't do that.
No.
Thank you for asking
That's
that.
Good. Well, this has been great. I think we probably take some questions if that.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah. So Alyssa, I will turn it back to you for questions here.
Absolutely. Thank you both for that wonderful conversation. I definitely want to move over to questions. If anybody has a question for Denise or Justin, please put it in the chat window and we'll address those. We'll start off with one that we received before the webinar. And this one is for you, Denise. So you were talking about trust and how you build that. How do you go about building trust with local government, schools, entities that don't necessarily report directly to the state, but are involved in that ecosystem. That's such a key component of what you're trying to do here. So how do you go about doing that with, it's basically influence without, influence without authority. How, can you give some examples of ways that you've done that in your environment?
Sure. Actually, I think being in my position, being able to outreach to those organizations has been a better form of trust than if I asked their regulating and or oversight entity to be able to do that. So that's a first plus for me. The second one would be show up. My senior leadership team, along with myself, we attend conferences, events, we show up at schools, we get opportunities to meet with teachers and students. And there's a couple of nonprofit organizations within the state too that have invited us to either board meetings or task forces. So it's the show up piece is really, really important. The other aspect is we have invited those same entities to the table on our task force and our councils too, so that they have a voice representing in the work that we are doing when it comes to the Cyber Advisory Council. We've got an AI economic task force as well that we're doing the same thing with. And I don't want to be their voice until they ask me to be.
Okay. Alyssa, you're on mute.
I think you're on mute again.
Apologies. Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. And then Justin, one for you before we wrap up here. What should public sector executives such as Denise and people on her team ask themselves to know whether they're truly building a sustainable whole of state model?
Yeah, the having an inventory of I guess kind of partner or target institutions, I think is really important. I think that's a critical first step. And practically and specifically, I think what that means is if you're like whatever your starting point is, whether you're a leader at a municipality, I think, and let's just call it you're in a major metro area, being able to build relationships with maybe the state as an easy and obvious example would be a good first step towards starting to build your inventory. Like those are natural connections. Or if you're a state leader, inventorying what the core service centers are within your geographic region, and that could be a large healthcare systems, it could be a large utility provider, it could be, again, a major metro area, and reaching out to them to start to develop some of those relationships, I think is really important. But it's important to have an inventory of like targets that you want to start to go after. And not to say the biggest ones are always the best. It's just the first one that people logically think. Sometimes those can be the hardest, and rather you want to start with something smaller that is easier to get in. Usually smaller institutions, it's easier to influence change. But how do you know that you're starting to build a sustainable program? I think it's not only starting to have those relationships, agree to have a working relationship together for like a shared purpose and a shared cause. There's various degrees on the capability and maturity level here. And even if it's something ad hoc in nature, like it still counts, right? And that's ad hoc might not feel like it qualifies, but it 100% does. And and to all the things we've talked about is like, these are when the foundational levels of trust start to really be formed, is when we're the early stages of the capability and maturity model. But I think when you start to try to answer the question, maybe like, okay, like when is it real and when is it sustainable? I think the moment that you have a relationship and you have an interconnected and shared mission with an entity that's not your own, you're on the path, right? And then you start to strengthen those relationships and those connections. And once that's done, and actually I shouldn't say done, it's never done. But once that's established, you can move on to the next one, right? And then you just keep building from there. And these are some of the bricks that I think leaders can start putting together to say, okay, like, are we doing it? Is it working? Yeah, 100%. If you have a connection with any entity outside of your own, you're on your path. And it may not be what you originally thought it was. It could be very, very different. And I think for anybody listening to this, or who I would share the message with, is like, everybody's going to be different. Like I've seen enough of this at this point. Is like, I think we have a framework and an idea of what it could be, but everybody's blueprint and everybody's whole estate architecture is going to be very, very different from one another.
Great, thank you so much. I'd like to thank both Justin and Denise for your time and your insights today and for sharing that with us. And for all of the rest of you on this call, thank you for joining us. The recording of this webinar will be sent out to you, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.